Agency law for the Illinois bar. Our general rule for any agency relationship is this: memorize it verbatim. Agency is a fiduciary relationship that arises when the agent manifests assent that the agent shall act on the principal's behalf and subject to the principal's control, and consent by the agent to so act. Okay, so our primary words there are consent and control. Let's repeat it again. Agency is what kind of relationship? That's right, a fiduciary relationship that arises when the, that's right, agent manifests assent that the agent shall act on whose behalf? The principal's behalf, and subject to whose control? That's right, the principal's control. And what do we need? Consent. By whom? The agent to so act. Agency is a fiduciary relationship that arises when the agent manifests assent that the agent shall act on the principal's behalf and subject to the principal's control, and consent by the agent to so act. What do we need? Consent by the agent. This can be voluntarily, has to be voluntary, but it can be expressed. And remember, consent may also be implied by conduct. And our second word was control. Control is the key element because the principal directs the agent's actions. So one more time, agency is, that's right, a fiduciary relationship that arises when the agent manifests assent that the agent shall act on the principal's behalf and subject to the principal's control, and finally, consent by the agent to so act. Can someone consent by conduct? Yes, an agent can consent to that relationship by implied acts of conduct. And our other key element is control. The principal directs the agent's actions. Interestingly, only the principal must have capacity to contract. The agent does not have to have capacity to contract. Contrast to a general partnership. Two persons enter into business as co-owners for profit and both have the capacity to contract. In an agency relationship, only the principal has capacity to contract. But remember, the agent can bind the principal in contract. Moving on, types of agents. One thing we want to note is that if a bar question requires an analysis of whether someone is an independent contractor or an agent, it's important to analyze all the types of agencies to see which fit. Okay, so our general agent, our special agent, our gratuitous agent, our employee, our independent contractor, and finally our sub-agent and our co-agent. General agent has actual authority and they are authorized to act for or bind the principal in any business capacity in which the principal could act themselves. Repeat, the agent has, that's right, actual authority, and they're authorized to do what? Act for or bind the principal in any, that's right, business capacity in which the principal could act for themselves. In other words, a general agent is authorized to act for and can bind the principal in any business capacity in which the principal could do themselves. Special agent is authorized to perform special acts. A special agent is authorized to perform only specific acts on specific instructions from the principal. So whereas a general agent can bind the principal for any business activity, the special agent can only perform specific acts according to specific instructions from the principal. In other words, one example might be a contract with a realtor to sell a home. The realtor is your special agent. The realtor is authorized to perform a specific act, market and sell your home, according to your specific instructions. Okay, special agent, special acts. General agent, all acts in which the principal could bind themselves. Gratuitous agents have no right to, that's right, compensation. They act for free. They derive no benefit from the relationship. Therefore, they are they're held to a lower standard of care, which we will get to later. Okay, so far we have three types of agents. General, they can bind the principal in, that's right, any business capacity in which the principal could, that's right, act for themselves. Our special agent, who can be bound for specific acts according to two specific instructions, and our gratuitous agent, who acts for free, in other words, without compensation or benefit. Now we move on to the two big ones, employee versus independent contractor. The key here is always control. The employer and the employee have what is termed a master-servant relationship. The agent employee is under direct control of the principal, and they are responsible for the entire process of providing service. An employee is under the direct control of the principal and is responsible for, that's right, the entire process of providing service. Contrast to an independent contractor who is responsible only for the finished product. So the key here is control. For an employee, all their actions are under direct control of the principal, and the employee is responsible for what? That's right, the entire process of providing service. Whereas an independent contractor is responsible only for what? That's right, the finished product. And we said the key is control. So they are not supervised by the principal. Generally, some indications of an independent contractor would be that they provide their own tools, they provide their own supplies, they pay their own taxes, they pay their own expenses, they use their own vehicle. Sometimes they'll have their own business. And one very important point, the independent contractor possesses specialized professional or technical skills not possessed by the general public. Okay, so the employee is under direct control, and they're responsible for what? The entire process, where the independent contractor is responsible only for, that's right, the finished product, and they are under no direct control or supervision by the principal. Some indications are that they provide what? That's right, their own tools, their own supplies, they pay their own taxes, they drive their own car, they pay their own expenses, maybe they have their own business. That's a fact-specific inquiry. But our number one is control, and that the independent contractor has what kind of skills? That's right, specialized, professional, or technical skills not possessed by the general public. Okay, let's talk about a hardware store employee who is responsible for the sale of refrigerators in the appliance department. They're responsible for the entire process of providing service. They work at the principal's workplace under the direct control of the principal, who controls what hours they work, whether they can take breaks, and probably pays them a salary. But the main element there is control. Whereas the employee sells a refrigerator and it is installed by an independent contractor who is responsible only for installation of the refrigerator. In other words, that finished product. The independent contractor, the installer, is probably a plumber, right? Because they have specialized professional and technical skills not possessed by the general public. Okay, moving on to a sub-agent. A sub-agent is an agent appointed by another agent. That's right, an agent appointed by another agent. A sub-agent is appointed by whom? That's right, another agent. And who are they responsible to? That's right, the agent who appointed them for those specific tasks. Who's responsible to the principal then? The appointing agent. Let's think about your job, Lisa. You work for Land of Lincoln. The top dog is Clarissa, executive director. You report to Andrew. Andrew is your appointing agent. Andrew is responsible for your conduct to his principal, Clarissa. Okay, subagent is a person appointed by another agent for specific tasks, and they report to the appointing agent, who in turn is responsible to the principal for the subagent's conduct. Finally, our last type of agent is a co-agent. Co-agents are like co-employees. They share the same principal. So the principal may appoint a co-agent, or another agent may appoint a co-agent. Okay, co-agents share the same principal. Who can appoint them? The principal or another agent. Think back to the case of Mill Street Church of Christ versus Hogan. We have the agent appointed to get the church painted, and he appointed his brother as a co-agent, actually a sub-agent. Mill Street Church of Christ objected, but the brother had appointed his brother actually to help paint the church. And the principal had, of course, held out to third parties that the brother was authorized to so act. So another agent may actually or apparently appoint the co-agent. Okay, co-agents share the same, that's right, principal. Who can appoint them? The principal or another agent, actually or apparently. Okay, so now we talked about the types of agents. Let's move on to termination of agency. Agency may terminate by will or by operation of law. Termination by will, our blanket rule is that the agency relationship is not terminated until the principal is notified. The agency relationship is not terminated until the principal knows. All right, A, B, C, D. There's intent to terminate, the power versus the right to terminate, and then when the term expires or its purpose is fulfilled. Okay, so termination by will. Either party may manifest intent to terminate. The principal may revoke the agency, or the agent may renounce the agency. But what is the key? That's right. The agency relationship will not be terminated until the principal is notified. Therefore, our key is that the principal's notification is required. Principal may revoke, agent may renounce. Either party could be terminated, but the principal must be notified. Okay, the power versus the right to terminate. The principal has the power to terminate the agency relationship at any time, but he may not possess the legal right to do so. That's our general rule. Let's repeat. The principal has the power to terminate the agency relationship at any time, but he may not possess the legal right to do so. Why? because he might be liable to the agent for damages under contract law for unpaid expenses, wages, and the like. Okay, power versus right. Principal has the power to terminate, but he may not have the right. And if he does so in breach of contract, he's going to be liable to the agent for damages. Okay, next. An agency can just expire. So an agency is terminated by intent, by the principal's power. When its term expires, it's just done. Or finally, when the agency's purpose is fulfilled. For example, I hire a realtor to sell my house. The purpose of the agency relationship is fulfilled when my house is sold. So termination by will, 4 items. Intent to terminate of either party, and what's the key? Must notify the principal. Power to terminate, the principal has the power to terminate at any time, but if they breach, in other words, they don't have the legal right, they might be liable for damages. An agency can terminate when the term expires, or D, when its purpose is fulfilled. A, intent. B, power. C, term. D, purpose is fulfilled. Termination by will. Okay, how about third parties? Third parties, the principal must provide notice to third parties that the agency relationship is terminated. Repeat, the principal must notify third parties of the termination. What does this do? It protects the principal from further liability. Who must notify third parties of termination? The principal. And what does this do? It protects the principal from liability. Okay. Actual notice of termination to third parties who actually dealt with the agent. Actual notice to third parties who actually dealt with the agent. That's an easy one. Actual notice to third parties who actually dealt with the agent. Ron runs a hardware store, and he tells Linda that she is fired. Linda is a purchaser, and she has actually dealt with suppliers in the past. Ron must tell those suppliers that Linda is no longer with the company. Actual notice to those who actually dealt with the agent. By contrast, constructive notice or publication in a trade newspaper or ad to people who have not actually dealt with the agent in the past. Constructive notice to third parties who have not actually dealt with the agent. What happens if there is no constructive notice? The principal is bound if the agent goes out and exercises their apparent authority in the principal's name. Okay, let's go back to our scenario. Ron owns a hardware store. Linda is a purchaser. Ron fires Linda, but Linda keeps her business card. And she goes to a supplier and tries to open a line of credit in Ron's name. If Ron hasn't provided constructive notice to third parties, which is usually by what? Publication, then he is bound by Linda's exercise of her apparent authority. Okay, however, apparent authority is terminated when the third party knows or has reason to know that the agent's authority has been terminated. Ron fires Linda. Linda keeps her business card and goes to a new supplier, but the new supplier had heard through the grapevine that Linda was fired. So Linda no longer has apparent authority to bind Ron as principal because the new supplier, the third party, knows or has reason to know that Linda's authority has been terminated. Okay, notice to third parties. Actual notice to those who actually dealt with the agent. Constructive notice to people who have not actually dealt with the agent, or the principal is bound if the agent oversteps and uses their apparent authority in the principal's name. But if that third party knows or reasonably should know that the agent's authority has been terminated, then the principal is not bound. Okay, termination number 2, termination by operation of law. First of all, death or permanent incapacity will automatically destroy an agency relationship for either party. The incapacity can be permanent or it can be adjudicated. In other words, someone's adjudicated incapacitated. Okay, if the principal dies or the principal is permanently incapacitated, do you think he has liability? No. Automatic termination of the principal, of third parties' abilities to bind the principal. Okay, so when is this effective? It's effective when the agent is notified of the principal's death. Okay, so death or incapacity destroys the agency relationship for either party. If the principal dies or becomes incapacitated, that becomes effective when the agent knows about the principal's death or incapacity. Ron owns a hardware store. Linda is a purchaser. Ron dies of a heart attack while Linda is on a business trip, and Linda contracts with a supplier. Linda does not know that Ron died. The termination of the agency relationship is effective when Linda learns that Ron died. As for the agent, when the agent dies or becomes incapacitated, well, they can't bind anyone because dead people cannot act. All right, there's a third party prong here. The third party must have notice of the principal's death or permanent incapacity. Okay, how does this work? Ron dies of a heart attack. Linda is on a business trip. Linda goes to another supplier. Ron's wife calls the other supplier and says, "Oh my God, Ron died." Linda's authority to bind Ron is terminated because the new supplier has notice of the principal's death. This will terminate Linda's apparent authority. There's only one exception, and this would apply to where there was more than one principal. The agent has some sort of written instrument that allows them to act in spite of death or incapacity. Okay, the principal's bankruptcy will terminate, but that's too easy. The examiners don't test that, but what they do test is a material breach of a fiduciary duty owed to the principal. A material breach of the agent's fiduciary duty to the principal will terminate the agency relationship. This is the rule. Remember, this is highly testable. A material breach of a fiduciary duty owed to the principal will terminate the agent's relationship to the principal. So the agent violates her duty of loyalty, care, or obedience. A material breach of those duties will result in termination by operation of law. Okay, termination by operation of law, death or incapacity, the principal's bankruptcy, or 3, the agent makes a material breach of their fiduciary duty that they owe to the principal. Part 2, authority. This is the power of the agent to bind the principal. We have actual authority, apparent authority, and a subcategory, agency by estoppel. The rule for actual authority, memorize this verbatim. A person possesses actual authority to act on a principal's behalf if the principal's words or conduct would lead a reasonable person in the agent's position to believe the principal has authorized the agent to so act. Okay. A reasonable person in the agent's position would believe that the principal had authorized him to act on the principal's behalf. Actual authority arises when a reasonable person in whose position? The agent's position would believe that the principal had authorized him to act on the principal's behalf. A reasonable actual authority arises when a reasonable person in the agent's position would believe the principal had authorized him to act on the principal's behalf. Okay, we have actual express and actual implied. Actual express is very obvious, although I have missed this on bar questions in the past. It's written or it's clearly conveyed orally. So it's a written instruction or it's an oral instruction that is actual, express, explicit. That is actual, express authority. More testable is implied actual authority. This is authority that is implied by what? That's right, the actions or conduct of the principal. So our focus is more fact specific. For implied actual authority, we don't have specific instructions. In other words, we look to the facts. What is the principal's conduct? What kind of things did they communicate? What is the context? What are the circumstances? What are the known duties? All these may give rise to implied actual authority. So the agent may act with actual express or actual implied authority. Okay, let's talk about a purported agent. A purported agent doesn't have authority to act on behalf of the principal, but they do it anyway. A purported agent has no authority to act on behalf of the principal, but they do so anyway. Ron owns a hardware store. Linda is a purchaser. Ron fires Linda. Linda takes her business card to a supplier and tries to open a line of credit and does so. Who's liable on that contract? Okay, we're going to get into that in a minute, but if Linda was acting unauthorized, she lacks authority, she is liable on the contract for breaching the implied warranty of authority. A purported agent, a fake agent who doesn't have authority to act on behalf of the principal, but they do it anyway, are liable on the contract for breaching the implied warranty of authority. That's a purported agent. We're going to get into principal agent liability on contract and in tort momentarily. But remember, a purported agent is a fake agent. They lack authority to act on behalf of the principal, but they do it anyway. Okay, ratification. Of course, the principal can ratify an agent's unauthorized actions. They can do so expressly, or they can do so by conduct. Ratification by conduct would be accepting the benefits of a contract or just accepting other unauthorized acts of the principal, accepting goods that Linda bought as a supplier for the hardware store. The principal accepts the conduct or the principal accepts the benefits of a contract. They have ratified the acts of their agent by conduct. So ratification of unauthorized acts by the agent can be express or it can be by conduct. And the principal is then bound by that ratification. They accepted the benefits of the contract or they accepted the agent's unauthorized acts. That's it for actual authority. We have actual express, actual implied, Authority is implied by the actions of who? That's right, the principal. We have a purported agent, our fake agent, who lacks authority to act, but they do it anyway. And then the principal's authority to ratify the agent's conduct by accepting the benefits of a contract or accepting what the agent did, or just by saying, hey, I expressly or affirmatively accept this. Moving on to apparent authority. Remember, apparent means clearly visible. And our rule is apparent authority exists if the conduct of the principal leads a third party to reasonably believe that the agent had authority. In other words, apparent authority exists if the principal manifests to a third party or leads them to reasonably believe that the agent has authority to act on behalf of the principal. Apparent authority, the conduct of the principal leads whom? That's right, the third party to do what? Reasonably believe that the agent had authority to act on the principal's behalf. What do we mean by conduct? Of course, it can be written, spoken words, or it can also be conduct. And again, that is fact specific. What did they do? What is the context? What are the known circumstances? What are the duties? And again, reference Mill Street Church of Christ versus Hogan. Okay, so this means that the principal will be responsible, they will be liable, and they will be bound by the agent's actions under apparent authority. The principal themselves held out the agent as having authority. However, the principal has to be responsible for that information. Remember, our purported agent just walked into the hardware store with her business card and tried to act on behalf of the principal. She does not have apparent authority. Apparent authority exists when the principal is responsible or conducts themselves in such a way to lead the third party to believe that the agent had authority. Apparent authority, the principal acts. The principal is responsible for the information that leads that third party to believe the agent has authority. Now, this doesn't entirely get the third party off the hook because the third party has a duty to inquire. If the facts suggest to the third party that it might be unreasonable that an agent has authority, the third party has a duty to inquire. Ron has a hardware store. Linda is a purchaser. Linda goes to a supplier and hands him her business card. The supplier suspects that Linda no longer works for Ron. If he reasonably should know, or the facts suggest that things might be fishy, the supplier has a what? That's right, a duty to inquire. Okay, there's a wrinkle here. What if the principal is undisclosed? There isn't any apparent authority. This makes sense because apparent authority relies on the principal's manifestations to the third party. So you can't have apparent authority if the principal is undisclosed. If the third party doesn't know there is a principal, doesn't know the principal's name, they're undisclosed and no agent can have apparent authority. Can the principal be bound then? No. There was no manifestation from the principal that the agent had authority. If we are following the third restatement of agency, an undisclosed principal may be bound by an agent acting without authority, but only if the third party detrimentally relies on the agent and the principal doesn't take any reasonable steps to notify the third party of the error. Watteau versus Fenwick. Fenwick, his bar is bought by Watteau, right? Actually, no, they're bought by another agent, by another principal. Fenwick goes out and buys things which he is unauthorized to buy. The owner of Fenwick's bar was undisclosed, but he ended up being bound under the contract, Fenwick's purchases, because he did not take reasonable steps to notify that supplier. So under the third restatement of agency, an undisclosed principal can be bound by an agent acting without authority if the third party detrimentally relies on the agent and the principal doesn't take reasonable steps to notify the third party that the agent is not authorized to do those actions or make those contracts. Finally, we have agency by estoppel. This occurs when the principal silently stands back and permits the agent to act on his behalf. So if the principal is silent, there's agency by estoppel. The principal is estopped from denying the agency. The principal just silently stands back and allows the contract to go through, then they're estopped from denying there was an agency relationship. And that's the end of part 1.